But first, with each passing day, more questions emerge not only about Lydia Thorpe's fitness to sit in the Parliament, but now the constitutionality of it all. On Monday, she screamed like a banshee at the King and Queen, suggesting that she owed no allegiance to them because her oath wasn't a valid one.
And I swore allegiance to the Queen's hairs. If you listen close enough, it wasn't her heirs, it was her hairs that I was giving my allegiance to. And now that, they're no longer here, I don't know where that stands.
And I played that grab a little bit earlier when she was actually sworn in, and she's right, she did say hairs. So what's the end result to these revelations from Thorpe? What happens next? To try and get to the bottom of it all, I'm joined now by Legal Affairs contributor at The Australian, Chris Merritt. Chris, the Coalition says they're considering legal options about Thorpe and her standing, I guess, to be in Parliament. Labor is saying that they're considering a censure motion. You've written about this in The Australian today. So where do things stand for Lydia Thorpe?
It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. And I think at the very least, we need an investigation into the facts. We need to know exactly what happened. Did she subscribe to the oath, undertake the oath as set down in the Constitution? Or did she do it under duress? What did she in fact say? And does the written form that she completed, does that suffice? Is that sufficient? Or was that under duress? That's one point. The extra point is this. Has she disavowed that oath after her outburst before the King, where she said he is not her king? Does that amount to disavowing her oath? These are not insignificant issues. The Constitution is very clear about the requirements that must be fulfilled before senators can take their seats. And if those requirements are not fulfilled, a senator cannot validly take a seat in the Senate. So I think the starting point, there needs to be a factual inquiry to find out exactly what happened. The officers of the Senate might be the starting point, but I would not be at all surprised if this finishes up before the High Court. It needs to be clarified. We can't have... Go on.
I was just saying, forget all this rubbish that she misspoke. I mean, she was clearly proud of dodging the official words in her oath of affirmation. She doesn't swear allegiance to God. She clearly doesn't now swear allegiance to the Crown, but she was proud of dodging those official words. Then she sort of realised she got herself into hot water and she started to backtrack it on all of that. But listen to her excuse today about not understanding English.
Now, forgive me for not being, my English grammar isn't as good as others, and I spoke what I read, so I misspoke.
Now, out of the frying pan into the fire, if she says her English is bad, she sits in the Parliament, she signs off on legislation, she votes on legislation that impacts all of us. She has to read numbers in budgets. She signs all of that off. I mean, I think this is a joke.
Look, it's also inconsistent. Remember, she did tell the ABC, she appeared to be boasting that she'd effectively sidestepped the constitutional requirement to pledge allegiance to the head of state.
That's right.
Now, that's a major statement that can't be taken back. It's all very well to say that her grammar or her English is not the best. Well, I think this needs to be resolved. It can't be let lie. I think a censure motion is insufficient. I think we need the facts. We need a legal overlay on top of that, legal advice based on facts that have been assembled by the officers of the Senate in the first instance, I would imagine, would be a good place to start. But we've seen relatively obscure provisions of the Senate in the past. Section 44, for example, which prevents foreign citizens from taking seats in the Parliament. That cost a number of people their seats. Now, the Constitution is not to be fooled with. It's the ultimate law. You can't simply sidestep it and laugh it off. Otherwise, your opponents, your political opponents, will seize upon it, which is exactly what's happened.
Just on a related question that often gets put up when we look at her bad behaviour. She was elected under the Greens ticket. Fatima Payman's the same, elected under a Labor ticket. They didn't get much of a below the line vote. She quits the party but stays on in the parliament. If she had died in office, that seat reverts by convention to the party that got them elected, and they then choose another candidate to go forward. I mean, that's very well established. How is it that when you quit the party, you keep the seat? Surely we need a change where that seat reverts back to the party that elected them. And if we were to do that, Chris, what's the mechanism? Is it something as simple as legislative change, or is it constitutional change?
Look, I don't think legislation would cut the mustard. Section 14, I think it is, of the Constitution gives the political parties significant sway when it comes to selecting replacement senators, casual vacancies. This all dates back to a chaotic period in the late 70s when a couple of states, Queensland and New South Wales, broke with convention and made their own appointments. You might remember Joe Jelke-Peterson appointing Mr. Albert Field.
Yes.
Well, chaos led to change. There was a referendum, 1977 I think it was, which gave the political parties significant new power over who was to fill casual Senate vacancies. Now, on the one hand, I'm reluctant to hand more power to political parties, but we're in a very similar situation where you've got chaos emerging in the Senate with people bailing out of parties. It's not good for the governance of the country. I think if one or both major parties got together and put up a proposal to add a new provision to Section 14 dealing with this, that would be the way to handle it. And I can't see how too many people would oppose it.
I agree with that. I think that's inevitably where they will go. I'll get a tally actually next Monday of the number of them at the moment, but there is a whole lot of, single independents elected by political parties now sitting on the crossbench, and that's not good for democracy. Thanks very much, Chris. We'll stay across that issue because I do not think that's the last time we'll discuss Lydia Thorpe.